Hello, my name is Opal, and for Module 9, I will be talking about disability justice. So, the first policy I'd like to talk about is IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA ensures access to education for students with disabilities. It was created to address exclusion and inequality. What this guarantees is free, appropriate public education and special education services. A lot of students with disabilities are excluded from a lot of programs to access the same education that everyone is entitled to receive. And the quote here is IDEA ensures that all children with disabilities have available to them with a free, appropriate public education. So, in other words, a major law connected to disability inclusion is IDEA. IDEA guarantees eligible children with disabilities a free, appropriate public education and ensures that they receive special education and related services. It was meant to address the exclusion and inequitable treatment of children with disabilities in schools. Before these protections, many students with disabilities were denied full access to public educations and were placed in settings that did not meet their needs. The impact of IDEA was that it it has been major because it established educational rights, individual planning, and stronger accountability for serving students with disabilities. At the same time, implementing gaps that still exist, especially for students who face overlapping inequalities tied to race, language, poverty, or undersourced schools. And this quote here is despite legal protections, disparities in special education services persist across racial and socioeconomic groups. Just like for me, I'm a student that had an IEP. I have dyslexia and I have, as you can tell, I have a little bit of speech impediment. Without the programs that were given, I wouldn't have been able to be in college as it is right now. I do wish that I was diagnosed a little bit earlier. I wasn't diagnosed until like high school with dyslexia, but my speech impediment never was really addressed. So there are some benefits of the programs, but in other cases, there was a lot of downfalls for it. To build onto that, let's talk about disability justice and ADA. You can also connect disability justice more broadly to the Americans with Disability Act, which prohibits disability discrimination in many areas of public life and frames disability rights as civil rights. So, if you connect ADA to school, you can prevent discrimination in employment, education, and public spaces. The ADA represents a shift towards viewing disability as a civil rights issue because many people with disabilities still face some form of discrimination at one point in their life. In my next slide, we'll be talking about applying to future careers. In my future career, I can apply the principles of accessibility and inclusion by ensuring services are not just available in theory, but actually usable for people I work with. For example, if I become a social worker, I would make sure communication is accessible by offering plain language, alternative formats, flexible meeting options, and accommodations based on clients says that they need. I imagine using this approach because disability inclusion practice helps remove barriers instead of expecting clients to adapt to unacceptable systems. This aligns with social work because it centers on dignity, participation, and equity. Another concept I would apply in person centered practice. Instead of assuming what is best for a disabled client, I would ask what support communication style and advocacy approach works best for them. That matters because disability justice pushes professionals to value autonomy and lived experience. In the following quote, person-centered approaches emphasizes the individual preference, needs, and values in decision making. In my next slide, I will be talking about advocacy focus. The most important area of advocacy with disability communities is access and non-discrimination. Without access, people can be excluded from education, employment, housing, transportation, healthcare, and civics life. That is why laws like IDEA, Section 504, and the ADA matters so much. They did not treat disability as a personal flaw, but as a civil rights issue shaped by barriers in society. Section 504 imposes non-discrimination obligations on federally funded programs, and the ADA broadly prohibits disability discrimination in everyday life. I think this area is especially important because real inclusion requires more than sympathy. It requires change to structures, environments, and policies that the disabled people can participate fully. That makes advocacy both personal and systemic. In these two quotes here that I'm going to talk about, disability is not simply a feature of the individual, but it's a complex collection of conditions created by the social environment. Another quote is barriers to access, rather than impairments themselves, often limit participation in society. And to build off of that, the reason why advocacy is so important is because disability justice can create systemic change by removing barriers and creating a more inclusive environment for everyone. Advocacy can be on a client level or a structural policy that is being implemented. In the quote here, disability shaped by social, political, environmental barriers. True inclusion requires systemic change because if we do not change the system that we are in, they will no be further, there wouldn't be, there would be no change. We would be in the same boat that we're in. The ethical dilemma is an ethical issue that could arise when working with people with disabilities is deciding how to support safety without becoming paternalistic. A social worker may believe a client needs protection, but acting too quickly without listening can override self-determination and reinforce harmful assumptions that disabled people are incapable of making decisions. The challenge is to support the client while respecting autonomy, communication, differences, and informed choice. So, and the quote here is overprotection can undermine the autonomy and reinforce dependency among individuals with disabilities. People with disabilities have a voice. They just want their voice to be heard by them. They don't want people talking for them or making decisions for them. They want to be the ones to push for the change as well. They want to tell you what's wrong. They want to show you what's wrong. We just need to sit back and listen and advocate for them when they need us to advocate for them. For the NASW principle, the principle that best fits this module is social justice. Disability justice is deeply connected to fighting discrimination, exclusion, and unequal access. Social workers are called not only to help individuals, but to also change the systems that create barriers in the first place. The NASW Code of Ethics frames social justice as the core value of ethical principle. And the quote here is social justice is a core value that requires challenging social inequalities and oppression. These are my references for the slides. And thank you so much for listening to me. Have a good day.